Hello, this is Dr. Do again. This video is on alphabetic list problems. Continue with the letter I. I'm going to continue with the previous video, interpretation of diseases on the cell level. Last time I talked about the parenchyma cells and the mesenchyme cells, and also associated with some basic structures of the cells, from the cell membranes to the cell organelles. And today I'm going to connect those microstructures of the cells into disease. So any structures around the cells, either parenchyma or mesenchymal cells, any structures had abnormalities will lead to disease, different kind of diseases. For example, the cell membrane. The cell membrane I mentioned is the very unique structure, except the hydrophobic molecules, because of this double layer of lipids in between the hydrophobic and hydrophilic structures. So this is the hydrophobic molecules can pass away, but some hydrophilic molecules like the ions has to go through the channels. So if any of those channels, like sodium channel, potassium channel, along the cell membrane had problems, that will lead to the diseases, different kind of disease. For example, the cystic fibrosis is one of the diseases that associated with this chloride channel around the cell membrane. So, and also on the cell membrane contain a lot of receptors. The receptors for different kind of hormones and signal transductions. I'll give you another example as insulin receptor. Insulin receptor located at the cell membrane in the muscles or liver or adipose tissue or fat cells. So any of those, actually in type 2 diabetes, is the receptor on the cell membrane not function well, so then cannot perceive the signal of insulin to decrease, to take the glucose to decrease the blood glucose level, to synthesize glycogen as storage. So this is another structure on the cell membrane. If it's not function well, can cause disease. Inside of the cell plasma, of course, the organelles, they're very important. The nucleus, the chromosomes, has different kind of disease. For example, we have 23 pairs of chromosome. You already know it. 22 pairs are the somatic. The last pair, the 23rd pair, was determine the gender and the sex of the infants, of the people, which means XY, XX. So you probably know it. I just bring here. So any of those chromosomes has problems that leading to the congenital or genetic disease. That's, I think, it's a common knowledge, common sense. You probably already know it. And the organelles, another organelle, for example, the mitochondria. There are a lot of diseases associated with mitochondria. Mitochondria, first of all, the enzymes of the oxidation reaction generate ATP. If any of those enzymes not function well, of course, can cause this kind of problems, which are serious metabolism problem. And also, mitochondria contain its own DNA. So those if those DNAs had problems, that is a genetic disease inherited as a mitochondria inherited pattern to pass it down to next generations. And some other organelles like the peroxisome or Golgi or ribosome. So if any of these structures had problems, that will lead to the disease process. In general, and the parenchyma cells itself, for example, I talk about the liver, the hepatocytes, which is hexagon structure responsible synthesize the biles. If those kind of cells undergoing pathological change or not function well, either develop the cancer or the inability to synthesize biles, or the causing a lot of the necrosis of those hepatocytes, we have the fibrosis occur afterwards, because those hepatocytes, after huge amount of necrosis, cannot regenerate by itself. It has to be replaced by the fibric cells, so like the alcohol cause the cirrhosis. That's the example of the parenchymal cells has this kind of condition, diseases. The the other example of the parenchymal cell disease in the kidney. Kidney has the glomerular, for example. Those are the globe of the capillaries wrapping inside of the capsules, and the parenchymal cells of the kidney consider those cubic tubular cells. So if any of those cells normally function as to filter, or actually to reabsorb or excrete the ions and proteins or any other structures to, after the filtration, the tubule cells will reabsorb them back. If any of those cells in the different segment of tubules undergoing pathological change cannot function, that will lead to the nephropathy. Nephropathy, for example, losing proteins or losing ions or losing red blood cells even. So these are the for the red blood cells losing from the glomerular cell, from the filtration membrane actually. So the parenchymal cells of kidney really refer to the cubic tubule cells. If those cells not function, really nephropathy, losing proteins and the irons. So these are the parenchymal cells, and also in terms of the cell structure inside of cells. The mesenchymal cells are a group of the cells in between the parenchymal cells. Every organ have those kind of cells. It's similar as interstitial cells. For example, interstitial lung disease, interstitial renal disease, referring to those non-parenchymal cells diseases, either cause the inflammation or the fibrosis or undergoing with loss of function. So these are and also some inflammatory cells also in the tissue among those non-parenchymal cells. The mesenchymal cells are the group of cells that inside of the organs doesn't belong to any special group, but just carrying out the functions as unique to connect or to serve as inflammation, anti-inflammation, or serve as to repair. So these are the organs that, if those mesenchymal cells not function well, will develop interstitial diseases. I already mentioned those. So these are the other video, continuously previous one, on the cell level, cellular level, to explain the diseases. Another, I think I missed one, is the nucleus. I already talked about the DNA problem. And some of the nucleus, the DNA contain the receptors for the steroid, for example, or for any lipid like hormones. They just pass the cell membrane, pass the nucleus membrane, directly bound to the DNA. So if that receptors, or not called the receptor but the element, the hormone binding element, undergoing changes or not perceiving the signal correctly, also can lead to the metabolic diseases. So this is about the cells, and also different in terms of parenchyma, mesenchyme, and also in terms of inside of the cell structure, what kind of clinical orientation, what kind of diseases associated with different kind of structures. I kind put horizontally or vertically to put everything together, so you have some idea to interpret the disease. So I'm going to stop here. I hope that I explained clearly, but if you're interested, the purpose for this video is to give you some idea, some terminology, some concept. If you're interested, you can search and you can definitely find deeper and broader information compared to what I'm talking about here. So I'm going to stop here, and thank you for watching. I will see you next time.